You're listening to the Sustainable Angler Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Crawford. In this episode, I interview Marine Fish Conservation Network's Tom Sadler, and we get into the history of fish conservation, both from a freshwater and saltwater standpoint, discuss the value of science, pose the question, can we use Magnuson-Stevens Act as a model for protecting fisheries and our planet from climate change, and also the business case for sustainability. And finally, the amazing work that the Marine Fish Conservation Network is doing to ensure that federal fisheries management is taking a science-based approach. Hope you enjoy. This episode of The Sustainable Angler is brought to you by Olokai. Olokai is all about handcrafted footwear, finding inspiration in Hawaiian culture and craftsmanship. Fishing is at the heart of Hawaiian culture today, just as it has been for centuries. Generations of fishermen and women expertly cast from rocky shorelines. They spearfish, throw net, and navigate their boats into the deep blue in search of the next catch. No matter how they do it, there's an attention to detail and respect for the ocean that guides their passion. At Olokai, they believe in the same attention to detail when crafting the highest quality shoes and sandals built for every type of marine environment. Olakai's water-friendly Noheamoku slip-on shoe features razor siping for extra grip on the deck, and it's designed for easy on-off barefoot wear. And when it comes to sandals that perform, Olakai's new Ulele provides the comfort and durability of a sneaker. Personally, I love the grip on the Noheamokus. They're the perfect shoe for spending a day looking for tails, whether you're on the poling platform or the casting platform. And I also love that Olokai is a B Corp, meaning that they meet the highest social and environmental standards as a company. Whether you're loading up the boat or shoreline fishing from the rocks, Olokai takes you further. Find your local retailer at olokai.com. So Tom, I was kind of, looking over your bio, and you've got like an amazing, and clearly have spent from what I have read and seen, I mean, your entire career has been really focused on protecting fisheries, and sounds like a lot of it was also at on the policy front. But instead of me putting words in your mouth, can you just give us a rundown of how you got into conservation and just let you run with it from there?
Sure. Well, as you noted, I work for the Marine Fish Conservation Network here in Virginia, and I've been involved in fishing or in some capacity since I was about 6.5 weeks old. There's a historic story that the family told about how I spent my first night under canvas at Little Duck Cove on Moosehead Lake when I was 6.5 weeks old. And if you think about that, that means my mother was 6.5 weeks from having given birth. So she was an outdoors woman of the first rank. And the story she likes to tell is, he spent his first night out when he was 6.5 weeks old, and it's been hard to keep him indoors since. And I was very fortunate to have grandparents, grandfathers, and grandmothers who were all avid anglers. I spent my summers at Moosehead Lake in Maine, and then a part of my summer in Newport, Rhode Island. So got both marine and freshwater fishing in. And I have taken a long journey to get to the Marine Fish Conservation Network. Going sort of backwards, before I was here, I was the executive director of the Outdoor Writers Association, which was feeding my journalism chops and interests. And then going sort of backwards from there, I worked for the Trust for Public Land doing land conservation work. I worked for the Isaac Walton League. I worked for the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation. And then I also worked in corporate America. I worked for Waste Management and worked for ComSat Corporation. So, but all of those jobs, other than really the Outdoor Writers Association, were all advocacy jobs, lobbying jobs. I wear the big red L, lobbyist, for a number of years. And the last half of that has all been pretty much freshwater lobbying, working to protect our freshwater resources, working with, the Ikes or the TU and groups like that. And then, but now spending quite a bit of time doing the marine stuff, which is historic in my family, but not something that I had spent a lot of time on originally. But came to it, frankly, because I was appalled as I learned more about what's happening to our marine resources. I was appalled at what was happening and realized that if this had been happening on the terrestrial side, there'd be pitchforks and torches. And there's a lot of reasons why marine conservation work is very different from freshwater conservation work. But I felt like, wow, this is an area where, I think actually if I got involved, I could help make a difference. And so I took this gig with the Marine Fish Conservation Network.
So a couple of things. So first off, just on a personal level, I mean, I admire you tremendously. So this was, you've dedicated your life and your career to conservation work, which is, obviously incredibly admirable. But something that you just said that is interesting to me is, so how is, and there's a few other things I want to talk about, but how is freshwater conservation different from saltwater? You just mentioned that there was a difference there. I'm curious about that.
Well, so there's a couple of differences. One, we have been managing our freshwater resources for significantly longer than we've been managing our marine resources.
Okay.
You did a podcast with John McMurray and Tony Friedrich, yep. And I commend it to your listeners if you want a great primer on marine resource management and the history. Tony and John did a terrific job there. But the freshwater conservation, especially from the angler point of view, the guy who just goes out to fish, not for a living, but just for enjoyment. A lot of that work was done by the Isaac Walton League, for one, and Trout Unlimited after. And I think Trout Unlimited Isaac Walton League's over 100 years old, and I think Trout Unlimited is getting pretty close to that. But those folks saw what was happening to our waters and stepped in and really activated people, a lot like what we do today, and got laws put in place and got management measures put in place, accountability put in place, and working with the states and the feds, pointed to the importance of these outdoor resources. And during my time, I was on the board of the American Fly Fishing Trade Association for 9 years, and it is one of the things that drove AFTA's policy point of view was, it was access to healthy habitat created recreational opportunity that drove economic activity. And so what that means is that if you don't have a place to fish, you're not going to have a fishing business.
Yep. No
all
fish, no
of
customers.
that, no fish, no customers. And that is absolutely rock solid in the freshwater, um, world, if you will. And fly anglers, to their great credit, have adopted a conservation ethos almost from the get-go. And we could spend a whole podcast talking on the history of fly fishing. But so where does this happen? So what's the difference? Your question was, what's the difference between the marine side? Well, the marine side is, one, it was in the mid 70s when, because of intrusions from foreign fishing vessels, the Magnuson-Stevens Act was put in place to protect our commercial fishing interests. But over the years, and as it's been reauthorized, and it's supposed to be reauthorized every 10 years, and we're in the reauthorization cycle right now, there have been management schemes put in place that have improved the opportunities for fishing, both for commercial and for recreational, and the different elements or sectors that use our marine resources. But what we're seeing is the impact of legacy activities, right? Where, back in the 40s and 50s, dilution was a solution. Well, we saw what happened when we did that to our rivers and lakes, but we haven't taken the same interest in what's that doing to our oceans. And, one of the things that is an easy one to see is plastics, right?
Yeah.
And so, what I saw was, the plastic gyres across the global oceans. I saw, entanglements. I saw, just the impact on those resources, and it annoyed me. And we're really in the early stages. If you think, mid 70s to 2020, we're early on here, and it's much more challenging because there aren't a variety of laws to fall back on to enforce good practices in our marine spaces.
I thought this might be a good spot to take a quick break and thank Turner Flats, another one of our sponsors. Turner Flats is Belize's premier saltwater fly fishing, scuba diving, and marine ecotourism destination. Turner Flats is a charter member of 1% for the Planet, is Green Globe certified, and most recently has installed a solar system that not only meets 80% of its energy needs, but also helps to solve climate change. Visit tflats.com to book your next fly fishing adventure, and sleep well knowing you are supporting a lodge that puts sustainability first.
Wow, that was a really long answer to a simple question.
No, but it's interesting because I like the history of it, but also, yeah, you're exactly. I mean, a lot of people, and myself included, I've never really thought about how long, like, for example, Trout Unlimited has been around, and it's like, it's crazy. Wow. It's been like 100 years. Mm-hmm. And I grew up in Savannah, Georgia, and, grew up fishing and enjoying the resources like any American who lives on the coast, I would imagine, that has an opportunity to go out and fish. But there is a different ethos and mindset in saltwater. It's a fill the cooler mindset in a lot of places. And so I appreciate your perspective, because I've never thought of it in terms of we're kind of just starting on the marine side of things. But so anyway, That's helpful.
Well, and you make and that's one of the distinctions here, right? You don't have a commercial fishery to the size that you have. You don't have a commercial fishery in our freshwater areas that you do in our marine areas, right? I mean, it's our oceans are a major food source. Our freshwater resources are not a major food source.
Yeah.
And so that's a big tension. And when Warren Magnuson and Ted Stevens were looking at that, that was what was driving them. This was an economic interest. And so, we have historically, we being the United States, have historically undervalued our recreational resources at their expense to benefit our commercial resources. And you see that on the terrestrial side with extraction industry versus recreational industry. But we're now beginning to see those same lessons are being learned in the marine space, right? Yeah. So, but the tension there is this commercial use of our marine resources, and it's an essential use of those marine resources. And by and large, the commercial players will do a good job. And they're like any big business, is what they're really looking for is certainty. And that's why they have embraced the last iteration of the Magnuson-Stevens Act. And because it gives them certainty on how they're doing their business. And but it's a tension we don't see in the terrestrial side. And for me, it's fascinating. It's a wonderful venue to operate in, even if at sometimes it's really heartbreaking because you see the damage that's been done and you see the lack of awareness to how to get to a solution. And again, I'll go back to your podcast with Tony and John, is, they talked about managing for abundance. And it's something that, is almost a no-brainer on the terrestrial side. And yet it's a challenge to get people to embrace it on the marine side. And in fact, John tells the story about how, he's vilified for taking that approach. And so we're learning some very important lessons in the marine space and I think I'm fortunate because I've been able to operate in the terrestrial side. We'd already learned on the terrestrial side, those lessons.
Yeah. And part of Magnuson-Stevens, from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things that made Magnuson-Stevens such a success was the fact that they took a science-based approach. I mean, am I wrong there? Or
no, absolutely.
Right? I mean, that was the key to its success, in fact.
Yeah, and the key to it was the science is underpinning the management requirements and the accountability requirements. They're saying we're managing to these scientific numbers. And, you're always, and it's unfortunate that it almost seems like a badge of honor these days, but you're always going to have people who criticize the science. Well, as, I said to someone this morning, science doesn't really care what your opinion is. Right. Science is the science. And so that's where you get into the politics and the advocacy, and that's my world. I am not a policy guy. I understand it. I know how to write legislation, but I can't tell you the every provision and section and paragraph of the Magnuson-Stevens Act, but I know a hell of a lot about the politics. And so that's the world I play in. And it is very comforting to know that I am defending a law that is foundational in science. That is where they hang their hat. And the goal is to create sustainable, abundant fisheries for all users. If you go into the terrestrial side, it's like the wise use movement, and it's like, so everybody gets to benefit, not just one sector. And the politics gets hairy when one sector feels like they're getting screwed, and they're going to push back, and that's what happens at the councils, and that's what happens at the states, and it can get pretty hairy. And it's, again, I'll go back to your podcast, a great podcast with John and Tony. I mean, John tells that story about how hairy it gets.
Yeah.
And I'm just involved in a little bit of a political hairiness here in the Commonwealth of Virginia over the management of menhaden. And, I thrive on it, to be quite frank. But I really wish I didn't have to do it.
Right. And in Virginia, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, because I learned a lot from John and Tony as well on that. But a lot of this has to do with the over harvesting of menhaden by corporations, right? Am I on track there?
Yeah. Well, so there's there's one company, Cook, who owns a reduction fishery, Omega Protein.
That's
based in Virginia, and Cook is infamous. They're involved in the steelhead and salmon fishery out in doing aquaculture out in the Pacific Northwest. But let's not go there right now. So this reduction fishery is, they gather up menhaden in purse seines and grind them up for food, fish food and dog food and omega-3 oils. And it's a legitimate business. And they were operating under the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission Fisheries Management Plan. And it is all it's all a big commercial enterprise, and they kind of got crosswise when the rules set by the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission were not adopted by the Commonwealth of Virginia. And where it gets politically hairy is the Commonwealth of Virginia, their General Assembly was managing menhaden, the only fish that they were managing. Everything else was managed by the Virginia Marine Resources Commission. And so, because the Virginia General Assembly never adopted the management measures created by the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, the Omega continued to fish, and fished at a level that was in conflict with the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission's management plan for fishing in the lower Chesapeake Bay. And it created enough of a controversy that the Secretary of Commerce found the state of the Commonwealth of Virginia out of compliance and said, if you don't come into compliance by June 17th of 2020, you will not be able to fish for menhaden. And that was a pretty solid shot across the bow of Omega in terms of, hey, we need to come to the table and figure out this. And what the General Assembly is doing right now is passing a law that will take the management out of the General Assembly's hands and put it back in the Virginia Marine Resources Commission's hands.
Wow. So things are things are getting heated.
Yeah, but it actually worked out. I mean, we're very fortunate here in Virginia to have a very talented and experienced Secretary of Natural Resources, Matt Strickler, who worked on Capitol Hill for the House Natural Resources Committee. So he knows what the heck he's doing, and he knows politics, and he knows policy, and he's really good. And I don't say that just because he's a friend of mine, but he's really good. And so he was able to take this very hairy situation and walk it through the General Assembly and to a point where even Omega is supporting the legislation.
Okay,
and you
cool.
can speculate on the politics of this, but at the end of the day, kudos to Omega for saying, yes, we understand we need to come to the table and work this out.
Well, and I think that, going back to talking about Magnuson Stevens and how this works is it's so I try and maybe oversimplify it, but I just, in order for my feeble brain to sort all this out, I have to put things in buckets. And the easiest way for me to describe it is to say, well, there's three ways that or three major environmental threats to fisheries. And to keep it very simple, I would call that the 3 Ps. That's
right.
Population, policy, and pollution. And within those three categories, there's a variety of different aspects. So on the population front, worldwide population's growing. So you can look at things like overfishing and how does that affect policy? And I think Magnuson, when it works well, when you let the science affect the management and the policy, it's the perfect, really the perfect example of how it should work. Is right. when you take a science-based approach, let that impact your management. Because our population is growing, you have to affect the policy. And in order to have good policy, it needs to be scientific. So it sounds, so I don't really, to be quite honest, I'm not sure exactly where I was going with that, other than Magnuson Stevens it kind of feels like it should be modeled, right? I mean, for other types of policy decisions.
For sure. And there are other aspects of Magnuson that are particularly noteworthy that aren't paralleled, at least off the top of my head, they aren't paralleled on the terrestrial side, at least on the aquatic side, is that, you have these councils, right? You have councils in the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, South Atlantic, Gulf, Pacific Northwest. I'm going to miss a couple, but each region has a council, right? And the councils are the ones that have the opportunity to set the management regimes and the managing the fisheries. And it's a great tool. Now, and it's much like having the Virginia Marine Resources Commission managing Menhaden as opposed to the General Assembly. You would not want every fish that is commercially or recreationally caught out of the ocean managed by Congress. And I love those guys. They've given me a great opportunity to have a terrific career as a lobbyist and working on the Hill, but I don't want to manage in the fish. I want the professionals. I want the science doing it. And so when you can devolve the management down to a council that is being given good science, each council has a science element to it, and the processes that are used are are based in science. It's a foundational element of the management and accountability under Magnuson, and it's a terrific model.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm like it's kind of like my wheels are kind of spinning over here, being like, I mean, how is how have we deviated from this model? Like it's crazy. It works, right? I mean, it's proven.
We haven't really deviated because we haven't really used it anywhere else. And so what one could argue is that as we get trickier issues, and I know it's an issue that you are particularly interested in, as we're dealing with the impacts of global climate change.
Yep.
We can't just sort of hope we get it right. If we screw this up, there ain't no planet B.
Right? Yeah, that's right.
We're summarily, and it's, as I say, I'm not doing this because it's going to save me. I'm 65 years old. My time on this earth, or I can see the end, right? I know what that looks like. I have an idea. I'm worried more about my granddaughter and my grandson, and what world are they going to have to deal with when they're my age, and their grandsons and granddaughters are saying, whoa, well, how come Grandpappy Sadler didn't do something about this when he could have? And I do worry about that. I mean, that is one of the things that drives my passion for this. And as I tell people many times, if I couldn't guide fly fishing, I'd have eaten a pistol years ago. It's and it's the fly fishing guiding. I'm very fortunate to guide for a very aware group here, the Mossy Creek Fly Fishing, and Colby and Brian are as conservation oriented as you would possibly want. So not only do we get to guide, but I get to play in the conservation world that way as well. And again, as I was saying, the whole point is it keeps me sane when I'm looking at a daunting element of, the future of our planet.
Yeah. And so for me, personally, it's like, so I initially started getting interested in conservation because I wanted to give back what I felt was owed because of what had, what nature and fishing and being fortunate enough to get to have all these great experiences outdoors, particularly when I lived out west, and fallen in love with our public lands. But now that I have a daughter who's 16 months old, this has taken on a whole nother level of, of like, okay, well, now the feathers are ruffled, and gloves are going to come off now. Mm-hmm. So what are how do we do this? And I think that we've kind of already said this, but I mean, I think it's worth saying again. And as Magnuson should be the blueprint as you go forward when you talk about a complex issue like climate change, because and I saw this the other day in Charleston, there's guys catching snook here in Charleston.
Yep.
So if you're
Tarpon in Chesapeake Bay.
Yeah, and I guess it was maybe even John and Tony we were talking, and they're opening up a white shrimp fishery in Virginia.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Which is it's like, look, okay, this is happening. Okay, right. It's not there's no stopping that. So what is the best way to manage it? Well, we need to take a scientific approach to affect the management and the policy. Look at Magnuson Stevens. The fisheries, the stocks rebounded. It worked. So it's I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but it's so important. Like,
it's not, the horse isn't dead and it needs more beating. It's right. It is. You're absolutely right. And here is the point again. I'll beat this horse. It's the science, right? It's the science. So if you're going to make complex decisions on resource management, and you're not bringing the science to bear to the problem, then you are begging for a mistake. You are begging for it. And if there is science available and you ignore it, then you are practicing management malfeasance in my opinion. And it is, I don't care whether it's freshwater, terrestrial land use, or the marine resources. There's science that we put men on the moon, right?
Yep.
We have the science. What we have to have those ways of doing business that when we regulate, when we legislate, that we are doing it based on the science. And that can be economic science. It can be, physical science. It can be, it can't, but what it can't be is just politically driven. And I know that sounds Pollyannish, especially from someone who's been in this business for 40 years. But if we're going to set the stage for the future, we should do the utmost we can to ground it in as much knowledge as we have. And I use things like going back to my dilution as a solution. At the time, we didn't know, right? I don't blame people who did that 50 years ago.
Right.
We didn't know. But if we were to continue to do it, and I am appalled that we're seeing that coming from this administration where we're rolling back environmental protections at the expense of our future. Shame on us. Shame on us for allowing that to happen.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's so the way, and this might be getting almost philosophical, but it to me, it's like, well, if science is truth, so
Science
this is
truth.
And so if that is true, which I believe it to be, or at least the scientific method is the most reasonable way to try and come to a conclusion that I could possibly think of, and that's what the science tells us, and you deviate from that, then you're wrong.
You're begging to get slapped down, and you know who's going to slap you down? Mother Nature. At some point, she's going to come along and slap you down and doom on you for letting it happen when you know better. And, that's the political element here. And that's where, when people are looking today and saying, well, what can I do about this? My answer is get involved. Ask people, why aren't you following the science? Why aren't we following the science here?
And all right. So I guess so do you have an opinion on that, or why aren't we?
I don't have I have an opinion. My opinion is based on my experience of that the politics drives a lot of the decision making, and I don't want to sound like politics is evil. It's actually a lubricant, and it's an important lubricant in the regulatory and legislative process. But it comes at a price, and what I would hope that men and women of goodwill would look and balance and weigh that price and say, yes, we have to come to a political compromise, but we understand the impacts that's going to have, and we have weighed those and said, okay, we can live with that future. And my experience tells me that doesn't happen all the time. And it's happening, in my opinion, significantly less than it was when I came to work on Capitol Hill in 1980. It is the policy making process today is held hostage to the political process, and that is bad news. Very, very bad news.
I mean, all right. So let's just. This can get depressing. Like, I mean, but it's what's happening, right? I mean, it's like but I guess back to what we were just saying too is, okay, well, what can I do about it? And I think I think it's who's I don't know who says it. Oh, it's Yvon Chouinard. Who is the answer to depression is action or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that's it, right? I mean, it's like, okay, well, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to fix it?
Well, that's where I was going, right? I mean, it is. You can get depressed, and so what's the solution to the depression? Okay, so I talked about mine. Mine is to go out and guide, right? Mine is to go out and enjoy our resources. And I am a enthusiast for both my cause and my outdoors, right? And it's I don't want people to lose sight of the fact that we are a resilient race. We are resilient. The human race is resilient. I don't mean that in the ethnic side. I mean that in the species side.
Yeah.
We are resilient. We will overcome this. The arc of justice bends towards righteousness. We will adapt. We will survive. But we have to be engaged in our own future. And I think it's enjoyable. I think it's healthy. I think it's a way to give to your community. And maybe I'm Pollyannish, but at 65, I don't think I'm that Pollyannish. People will generally do the right thing. I have political discussions with very close friends, and we are 180 degrees opposed on a policy. But you know what? We're really good friends. And that friendship is much more important than the political values. And I think we continue to see some erosion, but we also see people responding to the notion of, hey, we need to be a kinder place. And I honestly believe that we will work through our policy differences and come out on the other side a better nation for it. But it's going to be painful. Let's face it. It is. It's not going to be butterflies, unicorns, and rainbows, and nor should it be. Frankly, hard-won victories are hard-won victories, and they feel better because they're hard-won. It's no pain, no gain.
Yeah.
But and so I think it depends. I honestly don't think most people come into the policy world, come into even the political world, although I may be changing my opinion slightly on that one, but come into the political world with malfeasance on their mind. I think, but I do worry that sometimes the short view it overtakes the long view. But we saw that in the financial markets, and we're seeing changes there. We're seeing organizations like yours, companies like yours who are building a business saying, look, here's how to do it right. You're not just pointing your finger and saying you're doing it wrong. You're saying, let me show you how to do it right. And we're seeing that more and more. I think it was Goldman Sachs who just came up with a climate business. It's slow. It's never as fast as we want, but there's a special operators mantra that is, I should have it tattooed on my feet, that says, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. We're in the smooth part right now. We're in the smooth part. And that means that we can make the change, but you have to start with, I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to engage. And, you can engage on a variety of ways. And you mentioned Yvon, and I think, read his books, follow what Patagonia is doing in their business model and the material that they put forward on their website. Beyond the clothing, there's a whole lot of good information. Or you talk to Steve Hempkins from Orbis. Look at some of these brands. Look at what Orvis is doing. And you listen to Steve's podcast and they talk about how they're making incremental steps. That's the slow part. They're moving towards the smooth part. And that's what we all should be doing. And it's little things like, hey, I'm going to give up straws. I'm going to give up plastic straws, or I'm not going to take a plastic bag, or I'm going to use aluminum water bottles instead of plastic water bottles. It's a journey of 1,000 steps, but you got to take the first one. And that's where the personal responsibility comes in. And that's where the joy of saying, I'm making a difference.
Yeah. And
that's the antidote to the depressing side of it.
Well, yeah. And I agree. And something that you just said, which is something that I tell all of my clients is, hey, when it comes to sustainability, it's a journey. It's not a destination. Mm-hmm. And to me, it's not unlike trying to be the best person that you can be, or to be the best version of yourself. You're doing that for your company. And some of it is, you're not going to see fast results, but you're making those steps. You're doing the incremental things of saying, okay, well, how do we do this, or how do we get there? And it's all about taking those steps, and not about pointing fingers and saying, well, you didn't, you tried to do the right thing and you did it wrong and all that bunch of bull. It's about, hey, we're being honest and transparent as an organization. We know that there's no such thing as a sustainable product, by the way. Everything requires resources.
Right.
So it's not, there is no, but it's all about being the best version of yourself, right? Or being the best version of your company. And what does that look like? And to me, it looks like, well, let's do, when you factor in things like growing worldwide population, it would make sense to start doing everything that you can to responsibly manage resources now, mm-hmm. for the benefit of future generations. And that's sort of, getting into the, the original definition of sustainability from the UN Sustainable Development Goal definition.
Right.
And so, but that's the deal. And I think that's, if anyone listening to this is a business owner, I think an important thing for everyone to consider is just take the first step, do the little things. And even if it's not a big deal, or it's not like a big marketing story for your company or whatever, just do it because it's the right thing to do. And those things will start to add up, and you'll start to see the benefit, and it'll feel good, and you'll want to keep doing more of it because it ultimately is the right thing to do. And
that's right.
So anyway, that's my 2 cents on that.
No, and you're spot on, and I'm thrilled that you've got a business that does that and helps educate people. And it is that journey of 1,000 miles, and it is, you take the first step, and that you feel better for doing it, and pretty soon, what was once a nuisance is now a habit. And then you take another one on, and you take another one on, and you're contributing to the good of your fellow man, right? And I, yes, I am fully aware of the tragedy of the commons, but I'm also recognize that people will respond in a good way given the opportunity, and that we don't have to legislate common sense. In fact, we can't legislate common sense. We can't legislate morality, but we can certainly educate. And that's where I think we have a tremendous opportunity. And things like this podcast, where people are having conversations, where your guests are talking about these subjects, is a tremendous resource for people in the now and into the future to say, well, how do we we deal with this problem? I had the great opportunity to go speak to a 5th grade class, and they wanted to know about plastics. They wanted to know about pollution in the ocean, right? And so I picked this one subject because it's so vast. And I said, let's talk about plastics. And we went through the aluminum bottles and the plastic straws. And I said, but I'm a fishing guide, right? I have fishing products, and I want to show you a fishing product that is made with fish nets. And they couldn't believe it. And I pulled out this fish pond bag, and I passed it around, and they were just thrilled, right? So it was a tangible thing for them to see, but it was an example of a business, a company that had said, "Hey, we're going to take a step. We're going to take these derelict nets and turn them into a product." And Patagonia does the same thing, and you're looking at recycled materials, and it's these incremental steps that are important to do, and they're important to celebrate. They're not important to point to and say, well, you should be doing what they're doing. No, it's aren't they doing a great job? Aren't they it's positive reinforcement.
Yeah, exactly. And so I love that story too. Because I think that particularly, you look at a class of 5th graders now, like the world that they'll be growing up in will be very different, but the business world they will be growing up in my opinion, is going to be one where if you're not solving a social or environmental problem, then you're not going to be in business very long, because they have to be solved. And so that's a perfect example of it.
I think you're right. And I think, Yvonne has seen that, Chenard's seen that. And I think he's staking the company's reputation on that. And I think it's brave, and I think it's terrific. And I think it's laudatory. And Fly Fishing Trade Association, they looked, Colby Troe, who was on the board and ultimately became chairman, who owns Mossy Creek Fly Fishing, said, hey, look at all these plastic boxes. Isn't there a better way to do this? And he went out and worked to find a cardboard solution, a recycled cardboard solution. And, it is a tremendous, it turned out to be economically a good idea too, which is great. But it was a way for the industry. And it was one guy. It wasn't like the whole industry came in and said, hey, we got to do this. It was like Colby said, this sucks. We're going to do something. We got to do something about this. And he did. And, it's something that was a little step, but now is, sort of like a no-brainer. Like, why wouldn't you do this? And there's a certain amount of peer pressure out there where people say, you mean you're still using those plastic cups? Yeah. Did you know you could save some money? It's not like, do you know you have to do the right thing? No, it's, do you know you could save some money? And that's the important of the economic science behind doing the right thing. And I think Chenard's figured this out. And,
absolutely.
And you've got a business that's pointing that out to people.
Yeah, well, I think, and that's part of it too. Is it's not only the right thing to do. There's a legitimate business case for it. So to not do it is just bad business. Like it's just not a good business decision.
It's my opinion that I don't want to be one of those hippie tree huggers. So I'm going to continue to use plastic. Great. Yeah. Keep at it, dude. I'll see you when your business. I'll buy your shit after your business is closed. Right. I don't mean to be ugly about it, but I mean that's it's like, okay, fine, be stupid. You know what? That's fine. There's an award. It's called the Darwin Awards for stupid people. I'll applaud for you.
That's hilarious.
So, and it's really not hard. And when you see the kids get it, and I went back, so I went back recently, they invited me back to see their project results, right? They do project-based learning there. And so they were showing me their brochures and their videos. And I was so stoked to see, I probably saw 90 kids, right, who'd put these things together. And it's like, wow, these guys really get it. They're really, really excited about making a difference and talking about this stuff. And, I applaud the teachers. I applaud the school system for saying, hey, we're going to give this information to these kids and give them an opportunity to learn from it and learn and put their hands on it. And that's the thing that keeps me in the game. That's the thing that keeps me in the game.
Well, yeah. And I mean, and it's so inspiring too, when you see something like that. And that's I've used this quote in several episodes. So I don't know if anyone is like a serial sustainable angler listener. So maybe you've never heard this before. But it's one of my favorite quotes about, and the conversation is not necessarily intentionally gone this way when we start talking about it, but at the end of the day, it's just one of those things where it really, I won't say sums up the conversation, because I still have a few more things I want to talk with you about it if you have a few more minutes.
Absolutely.
But it is such a powerful quote from someone who I also respect, is Paul Hawken. If anyone is ever looking for some great sustainable business books, he's also the recent one, which I would encourage if they're looking for some hope on the climate change front, is Project Drawdown: 100 Solutions to Solve Global Warming. There's some interesting information in there. But
awesome.
That said, the quote is, and I had to look this up while we were talking, because I don't have this memorized, just so everyone knows. But it says, if you look at the science that describes what is happening on Earth today and you aren't pessimistic, you don't understand data. If you meet people in this unnamed movement and aren't optimistic, you haven't got a heart. Meaning that, yeah, if we look at some of this data and we talk about climate change or fisheries conservation and good policy, bad policy, it can get daunting. But if you look at what you're talking about, you look at these kids, or you look at these companies, or you look at these people who are doing all these wonderful things and good things and aren't motivated by that, then you're really kind of missing the point. And I don't know. I just love that quote, and it has been good to be able to, I guess, revert back to that when sometimes I might be feeling a little bit down about some of the things that are happening. So I think it's a good one, but
it's a great one. And I think what it says is that there are a lot of heroes out there, right? And it's not hard for an individual to be a hero, to take that one step, take that one action that makes a difference, that starts to make a difference. You get a chance to run to the sound of the gunfire.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, one of the things, or another of the things, so we've been talking a lot about this, but what I think that if I was listening, I would want to know more about, is we didn't really get into, we said that you were with the Marine Fish Conservation Network, but we didn't talk about like specifically what y'all do and what your mission is. And I want to make sure that we talk about that, because y'all do really important work.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, I think we do. If you think about the Marine Fish Conservation Network in this way, is if you're walking along the waterfront and you look at the different businesses and organizations that you would see along the waterfront, whether it's Newport or Charleston or San Diego, you've got small boat commercial guys, you've got recreational fishermen, you've got scientists, you've got NGOs, you've got dive shops, sailboats. I mean, you name it. You got businesses, you've got users, you've got scientists, you've got organizations, and those are our constituents, right? And we work with all of those constituents to help develop public policy that is aimed at creating abundant fisheries and maintaining abundant fisheries. And we do that, and I've alluded to this, is we do that in support of our national fishing law, the Magnuson-Stevens Act. And so as we do that through a collaborative process. We don't write, Rob and I and the rest of the team don't sit down and write out, here's the legislation that everybody should support. We go through an iterative process. We look and say, let's identify the things that could work well, things that could be strengthened, things that maybe are impediments, and let's have those conversations. And we have some basic goals and legislative priorities, and all of that is on our website, and it's conservefish.org. Pretty simple website to find, conservefish.org. And we none of this will come as a shock. We're very supportive of what we like to call working waterfronts, the community that I just talked about. Those people, making sure that that there is a healthy business environment. And while we are very business oriented, we're not just a trade association like AFTA or something else, or OIA or something like that. We represent other groups and other user groups, recreational fishermen, surfers, sailors, et cetera, et cetera. But the other one, and the one, and I skipped over this, and I should know because it was one that I have the most excitement about these days, is our culinary community, our chefs and the suppliers to our chefs. And our chefs are, it's really the whole culinary side of this is fascinating, because they have they're like, in a lot of respects, they're like fly fishing guides or fishing guides. Is they rely on the abundance of the ocean to support their business, and then they do really creative stuff with that abundance. And so restaurants and seafood processors are all part of the constituency. And then this will come as no shock. We're very supportive of the science-based underpinnings of the Magnuson Act, and the way we manage our fisheries and how it is grounded. And so those are pretty much the top level things that we focus on, and we focus on that through the reauthorization of the Magnuson-Stevens Act, but also as the separate pieces of legislation pop up, we pay attention to them. We have discussions about them. We run them. We have a board and a policy council, and our policy council is made up of constituents from those sectors. And we vet those proposals, and we vet our posture or position on different policy proposals through that. As again, it's not Tom Sadler or Rob Vandermark deciding today, hey, you know what, we're going to be all in favor of X, Y, and Z. Yep. So it's very collaborative, and we work to strengthen other organizations. So if there's like John's group, right? We work, help them. We find opportunities for them. We look for ways to work collaboratively with them to help advance postures and positions that are consistent with where we are. We work with AFTA. We work with a variety of different groups to do that. And then what we bring to the table is, we've got some pretty serious policy chops. We've got a lobbying element to what we do. We have a communications tool or aspect to what we do, and that's where I spend more time. I'm not the policy guy. As I've said, I that's not my strength. But in terms of, if we're coming together, and I'll use our chefs as an example, right? If the chefs are saying, "Gee, how do we say this, right? What's the right way to say this?" We help them craft their messages. We work with the media that comes from my background in the outdoor media, and we try to share what we learn, and we do that through our blog. That's try to have at least one blog article up a week. Sometimes we have more, sometimes we miss a week, but we have a variety of writers who write for us, and it's mostly educational. There's there are not a lot of Joe and me stories up there. I don't think there may be one or two. But it's really current event-oriented educational material. That helps our constituency understand different aspects of implemented, impacted, developed, it depends, and it's not always all federal. Like I'm looking at the most recent blog article is on striped bass at the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, which is outside of Magnuson. Striped bass isn't managed by Magnuson. I'll put a plug in for I think it should be, but right. Nor is Menhaden, right? So we're not just there, and also. We do, I don't know if Congressman Cunningham is your congressman, but we did a piece he did a thing called Ocean's Moment, where we interview or give them some questions, and they give us their perspective on, and we put that up on our blog. And, Congressman Cunningham is obviously one of the climate change leaders on the Hill, and I think the world of him. I think he's terrific. I need hundreds more of him. So it's communications, it's policy development, it's message work, it's education, but it's not top down, it's bottom up.
Yep. So taking a collaborative approach to it all with different stakeholders and making sure that their voices are represented.
You said it much better, or much more succinctly than I did. But that's true.
No, not at all. I'm familiar with what y'all do, but I feel like, I don't know. I feel like there should be more people who are talking about what y'all do, because I've been following, and I use y'all as a resource, and I'm always staying current with what y'all have going on. So anyone,
well, it's always a tension in our business is, we're a collaborative convener, and we really try to shine the light on other people than on ourselves. And it sometimes means that people don't know who we are, and stakeholders getting the credit than us getting the credit. Although we like to believe that the approach that we take is one that lifts all boats, including our own.
Yep. Well, if anyone listening, again, wants to find out more information on Marine Fish Conservation Network, go to conservefish.org. Are y'all are a nonprofit? Is that right? I mean, is that part of the deal?
We're a C3.
Yep. So you can also go there.
You can. There is a donate now button on our website. So
you took the words out of my mouth. That's exactly where I was going. I was like, and there is a donate button in the top right corner of the website. And I'm sure
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we're very active on social media, especially Facebook. We do not have an Instagram account that we work with. We do Twitter, but mostly Twitter is amplification of our Facebook. But Rob, who does most of the Facebook stuff, because I have a love-hate with it. We a lot of times there's information that we could share on our blog, but that we know that the community garden, the community square, the town square is actually Facebook's the Marine Conservation Networks from the waterfront block. So we're listed that way. So I would very much encourage people to find us on Facebook and keep track of what we're doing there. Does a terrific job of amplifying stuff from different quarters.
Yep. Okay, cool.
I hate the damn thing.
All right, so let's shift gears a little bit here towards the end and talk a little fishing. So you are a guide in Virginia. What are y'all? What species are you targeting and whereabouts do you fish in Virginia?
Sure. Well, so I'm going to give a plug for Mossy Creek Fly Fishing, the best fly shop in Virginia, probably the best fly shop in the Mid-Atlantic, and I think the fly shop on the planet. But there you go. Yes, I am very biased, but we're very fortunate. The Shenandoah Valley sits between George Washington National Forest and the Shenandoah National Park, and we're breadbasket of the Confederacy. And what that means is that to the east and west of us are thousands of miles of brook trout. And my proudest work in freshwater conservation is brown brook trout. And so we spend a fair amount of time in spring and working with our clients to fish in our brook trout water, public water. And then the valley floor is full of spring creeks. And so we manage about 6 miles of spring creeks where we've got browns and rainbows and brook trout.
Wow.
And it's spectacular. It's absolutely spectacular. And there's a section, we manage private sections. We have a fee fish area that we manage, but there's also public water that the Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fisheries manages in concert with or cooperation with the landowners and Trout Unlimited. So you don't have to you can go fish 4 rounds on Mossy Creek, which is sort of what it's known for. It's a storied creek here in the Shenandoah Valley. And there was a park that was instigated by Brian and Colby Troe, who own Mossy Creek Fly Fishing, and in concert with I think the Fish and Wildlife Service was involved, NRCS was involved, National Resource Conservation Service, Unlimited to restore Mossy Creek to its original. It had been flooded to make a pond. A lake. The dam had been breached. The lake had been drained, and it had just created one base. It was restored to its natural or as close to its historic meanders as possible, which turned it into a terrific brown trout fishery. And that's all 30 minutes from the shop. And so I get to do all of that, and as I said, it is what keeps me sane. I get to go fish most weekends. I get to guide most weekends, and we have classes. We have our own classes, and then we're a Orbis endorsed school. So I think we're going to run either 12 or 16 classes this year. So we do a lot of angler education, which is, that's, if there's an entry point in conservation, I think fly fishing is one of the premier creators of conservationists, because the stories of fishing, fly fishing, are replete with the majesty of the fishing and the majesty of the locations. And we explain to people that you can't have this if you don't protect it, and people get it. I mean, I think that's just one of the fundamental elements of the fly fishing world, is that conservation ethos. So, and I'm very fortunate to work with Shop who cares about that. They dedicate a lot of time, a lot of their financial resources to doing the conservation work, and they've been very active over the years. And the shop's been around for 17 years. So, and the boys just turned 40. So you can see that a couple of young guys started early, started not probably in the best financial times, and have created tremendous fly shop. I commend people to, you want to see a pretty fly shop. 3 years ago, we moved the shop into a historic building in Harrisonburg. And so it's very community oriented that way.
I love it. All right. Well, special thanks to Tom Sadler for taking the time to do an interview with me here on The Sustainable Angler. We did have some technical difficulties towards the end of the call, and I wanted to make sure that some of this information was clear. So if you would like to support the work or make a donation to the Marine Fish Conservation Network, their website is conservefish.org. Also, Tom has a great blog with lots of information regarding conservation and fly fishing in Virginia, and that is at middlerivergroup.com. And you could also book a day of fishing with Tom Sadler at Mossy Creek Fly Fishing, and their website is mossycreekflyfishing.com. So again, thanks to Tom for joining me on The Sustainable Angler. And if you enjoyed this episode or any of the episodes that we put out, don't forget to give us a rating and review on iTunes, or a follow, like, or a share. That really helps us out a lot. And you can also find The Sustainable Angler anywhere you listen to podcasts. So whether that's iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, and more recently, we're now also on iHeartRadio. So anyway, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.